I want to bring in my guests. I'm joined with the man himself, Caleb Maupin. Caleb Maupin is a speaker, writer, journalist, and political analyst. Caleb, what is your organization one more time? It's Center for American Progress? That's not right. Center for Political Innovation.
Yes, the Center for Political Innovation,
That's it.
cpiusa.org. That's us.
Center for Political Innovation. Excellent. You guys had a recent meetup in Minneapolis, correct?
We did.
Give me 1 second.
Sure thing.
Well, yeah, how did it go? Did it go well?
It went very well, and there was a little twist. Can't say too much about it, but keep an eye on my YouTube channel because a video.
What do you mean you can't say too much about it? You can't do that. You can't pick the audience.
I don't want to give too much away. Let me put it that way. But it was more exciting than usual. Let me put it that way. But it still went very, very well. And keep an eye on my YouTube channel. There'll be a video that drops probably later today. Peter Coffin and I were out there, and it went very well. Great crew of folks. Lots of new people. Our workshop was all new people practically. And we had some important discussions. We were then in the streets of Minneapolis the next day. We unfurled a very big banner that had Putin and Trump shaking hands. It said, "We support peace talks and Ukraine war." We got a very positive response from the people driving by on the streets of Minneapolis. Thumbs up, honking their horns, waving. It was a great event, and we got to, it was neat because there were people who'd never heard these kinds of politics who came to our event. There was a woman who's a waitress at a very popular restaurant. There was a guy who owns a window cleaning company. There was a student from Duluth who drove about 2 hours to be there. Wow. It was just a really diverse group of people. There was a guy who was 80 years old. He was the son of communists. His parents were in the Communist Party, and he'd been a lifelong peace activist. He was 80 years old. He watches my YouTube channel, and he thought he wanted to be there as well. So it was quite a diverse group of people, to say the least.
That's really good.
Yeah, and we had a great time, honestly. And keep an eye out because it was not without some, shall we say, fireworks, but it all worked out. So keep an eye on my YouTube channel because we're releasing video of some of the exciting stuff that happened throughout the workshop. Let me put it that way. But
Fair enough.
It went very well. So
fair enough. You're not going to tell us. I'm not going to push. Fair enough.
You'll see in due time. Give it a couple hours. We want you to see it on our terms. Let's say it.
No, that's fair. That's fair. Yeah. I accept that. Give me your overall take on this geopolitical shift that has taken place, what I would consider to be an earthquake in regards to U.S. relations with Russia. And just to dig into this, yesterday at the UN General Assembly, the U.S. and Russia effectively agreed on one of the resolutions that was far more neutral in regards to the war. Now, European powers were eventually able to add in language to that, but put that to the side. When he got to the UN Security Council, the resolution that the U.S. put forward initially went through. Europe abdicated. Basically, they didn't make a vote. They absconded. It's not absconded. They abstained. So the resolution that went through the UN Security Council, which is, has effective law, it's the thing that matters per se, is effectively the joint resolution that the United States and Russia agreed on against the Europeans. So it's not just Trump doing stuff in theater sense. He is actually taking steps to set a framing and a context to end the war, and not just end the war, to normalize relations with Russia. How do you evaluate this geopolitical shift? Give us some context on this. I'm fascinated by what is taking place. I've never seen anything like it in my lifetime. What are your thoughts on it?
Well, I think you can put it in the context of a couple key trends that we're all aware of. The first of which is that, the main driving force behind the war against Russia has been mainstream media. Mainstream media has been beating the drum that, the Russian president is somehow a dictator, despite being overwhelmingly popular and elected in internationally observed elections. But he's a dictator, and you have to hate Russia. And Russia's trying to take over the world, even though they're not. Even though they did everything they could to avoid even going into Ukraine at the current moment. So the idea they're trying to take over the world is absurd. But it's been mainstream media outlets that have been the main driver of the hysteria against Russia. And you'll notice the mainstream media are also the very same people that have been telling us that Donald Trump is a dictator, that Donald Trump is literally Hitler, that if Donald Trump gets back into office, we're all going to die and the earth is going to burst into flames and we're all going to lose our civil liberties. The American people have largely rejected mainstream media. They voted for Donald Trump after hearing that he was a person on podcasts and hearing him explain and speak to the issues that are important to them and oppose mainstream media and its narratives, which are increasingly out of touch with what Americans want. And not surprisingly, Donald Trump is now in office and he's shifting U.S. foreign policy away from the mainstream media narrative of events. And he seems to be pivoting toward better relations with Russia. Now, I would like to see, I guess I will breathe easier when a peace deal is actually signed, when the war is over. So I'm holding my breath, so to speak. You know, it ain't over until it's over. And this all sounds nice and very friendly gestures are being made. And, you know, I understand about the minerals and Ukraine and all of that, but I want this war to actually stop, right? I don't want this to just be kind of a false start, but this is what the American people voted for. And this is against that globalist establishment that the European Union is very much part of, that the NATO alliance is very much part of. The American people have rejected that. The German people have rejected that at the polls. We don't want to be ruled by huge international multinational corporations. We don't want to carry out a globalist agenda of going against any country that opposes them. And it seems like there's a layer of people in Germany who just want wealth for Germans, and they just want the German economy to get stronger. There seems to be a layer of people in Britain who were not so concerned about the European Union and all that. They just wanted wealth for British people, and they wanted to make some money in Britain. And it seems like here in America, we have the same thing. There's a layer of people that are not so concerned about carrying out this agenda of spreading human rights and regime change and all of that. They're more concerned about just making more money here in America. Now, I'm not sure how well it's going to work out. If you dismantle the federal government, you get rid of lots of good paying government jobs. That money gets taken out of the economy. But
Yes.
We certainly have to see how these things go. And I'm waiting for something permanent. You know, I really like seeing the USA vote in nice ways at the United Nations and stuff. But I want to see the war actually end. I want to see an actual peace deal. I want to see where that border is going to be. I want to see an agreement. And when I see that, I'll breathe a lot easier. But all of it looks good right now. This seems to be what the American people want. It's what Russia wants. It's what the German people want. It's what the bulk of the people want. And it's against the increasingly detached agenda of some very, very powerful elites that are fuming with rage that they're not getting what they want, and they're beating with their chest loudly. But this is what global opinion wants. People want peace. People want what they called in Cold War terms détente. People want détente.
Agree. I think the overwhelming, I mean, Europe is finding itself to be more and more isolated, the more rabid they become. And when you get America pushing, saying, hey, let's end this. And the rest of the world is like, yes, let's end this. And then Europe is like, no, we want to keep this going. Okay, they're out of step with mainstream in their own populations, not just around the world. What is being touted as something that Trump said that goes against this notion of peace, which I don't think it does, but I'm going to get your take on it. This came out where Trump was talking about the mineral deal, and they were effectively saying, look, what is Zelensky getting for the deal? This was Trump's response.
Ukraine and this mineral deal. What does Ukraine get in return, Mr. President?
$350 billion and lots of equipment, and military equipment, and the right to fight on, and originally the right to fight. Look, Ukraine, I will say they're very brave and they're good soldiers, but without the United States and its money and its military equipment, this war would have been over in a very short period of time.
Some people are taking that to come away with the assessment that Donald Trump is saying, well, we're going to keep the war going. That's not what I really heard, though. What I heard out of that was, look, we gave them $350 billion. $350 billion is the number that Donald Trump says that we gave them, whether it's true or not. That's the number that he has always used when he's been talking about Ukraine and the money that we effectively gave him. So it sounds like he's saying effectively, look, we already gave them all of this money for the mineral wealth. And look, Trump has a vested interest in Ukrainian military fighting on. If they fall and collapse on the battlefield, your ability to negotiate anything about that war is over with. And so, give me a take on this. I've seen some people complain bitterly that Trump is going back on his word, that he lied. That's not what I got out of that statement. But what is your take?
Well, I think what you're seeing, there are way too many people, especially in our spheres, that are just very determined to say, "Oh, it's all over. No, 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 nothing's going to happen. It's just going to stay bad." You know, and I think of this, you know, the Homer Simpson cartoon, you know, old man yells at cloud. You know, there's a lot of people that are just kind of, that's what they want to reduce themselves to, and they're desperate for anything they can point to say, "Oh, there's no hope." Look, I have said to you here, it ain't over till it's over, right? And I want to see this war actually end. And I'm not declaring victory until we can actually see this war ended. And this war actually does need to end. I like everything I'm hearing with regards to Russia from the new administration. Absolutely. I'm very happy about it, but it needs to actually happen, right? And gestures are nice, but I want to see it actually end. But the idea that people are hearing an offhand remark like that and they're no, it's over. There's just so much of that in our circles, and it's really disappointing. It's very, very disappointing, because if you do that, you're kind of just declaring yourself not to be a factor. You're kind of ignoring our own agency. What we do and the activities that we do can actually make a difference. And if we just say, "Oh, it's over, it's hopeless," it's an easy place to hide. That's an easy place to hide.
Learn cynicism. Like it's cynicism that is coming out of reality. Like it's not. Look, I agree with you. So don't misunderstand me. In dealing with our political space, we hit our heads over and over again over what seems to be just nothing moves. Nothing gets going. This is why this is so fascinating, because this is one of those things where U.S. policy is actually changing, and we're watching U.S. policy change almost overnight. Those people who I would probably consider myself one of, I didn't react to this video, but you know, there were other videos that I probably would react to. It's learned cynicism. It's this notion that, you know, what you think is going to happen gets shifted to the worst spectrum, because what typically happens is on the worst spectrum, especially when you're looking at what they're doing politically. Like, I'll give you an example. $880 billion in cuts to Medicaid. Okay, well, there's no way to put a lipstick on that pig. That sucks. They're doing that purely for tax cuts.
Yep.
Like, I guess my point is, that's learned response. Like, you know that when he gets in office, that's what he's going to do. Your cynicism on it is proved correct by him getting in office and doing the very thing that you expect him to do. So when these little items and tidbits come up, the first thing is, I knew it. Meaning they were hopeful. It was something in them. They wanted something different. But their learned response is, this is going to go tragically bad. Give me a take on that. I mean, because there's Mark would say hopium, but there's a space for hope in politics. At least I think it is. But give me your take on this.
Well, you know, I put it in the same category as the glorification of Luigi Mangione, which I wrote a whole piece about. It's the same kind of psychology, right? Did anything change as a result of Brian Thompson being shot down on the streets of New York City? Nothing changed. But somebody got hurt, right? And all the negative feelings that we all have, which are very justified about an awful healthcare system that Brian Thompson was the poster child of, where, you know, corporations make big profits from denying people care. Well, somebody got killed, and so we can feel gleeful about it. And then we can go back to our lives. And it's that kind of bitterness and that downward spiral of cynicism that is how the establishment maintains its power. It's that if we get into that mindset of nothing can ever really change, there is no real hope, but we want to see somebody get hurt. We want to know that somebody else suffered the way we're suffering. We want to, you know, let our bitterness feel validated for a minute. That is really, really a dangerous place to be. And I mean, you know, I am all about calling out the ultra rich and how they have rigged things in their favor, and how they wage wars, and how they're depriving us of our civil liberties, and how we need a government of action to fight for working families. But if your politics and your political outlook is coming from a place of resentment, it's coming from a place of vengeance, it's never going to lead any place good, and you're going to kind of be stuck in this downward spiral. And I see that, you know, Luigi Mangione, every time he goes into court for another motion, the internet just goes wild. They're just absolutely, you know, in awe of this guy who did something that changed I guess we don't know that he did it, and there's a lot of speculation that he may be innocent, but he allegedly did something that didn't change anything. That is certainly disturbing. We're seeing a potential huge change in U.S. foreign policy, moving away from World War III, and everyone's looking for a way that it doesn't count. But we're then celebrating what appears to be an act of vengeful murder that didn't change anything, and that's a moment of celebration. That's very, very disturbing. And I gave this book the title on Amazon. That I had to chop The Killing of Brian Thompson out because recent tragic event or whatever. So on Amazon, it's just The Danger of American Years of Lead. On Lulu, It has the full title, The Killing of Brian Thompson. But when I talk about the years of lead, right? That was in Italy, the way that the Italian people and their will for Italy to leave NATO was overruled. Was that in order to prevent the Italian people from getting their way, and in order to prevent a coalition government from coming into office and removing Italy from NATO, the intelligence agencies engaged in all kinds of manipulation and psyops, in which they confused people, in which there were far-right groups and far-left groups that killed each other, far-left groups killing other far-left groups, far-right groups killing other far-right groups, assassinations, bombings, etc. And it made politics so confusing. It made it just a complete clusterfuck where no one knew who anybody was or what side anybody was on, and extremist groups were very violent, that people were just kind of demoralized and became rather cynical. People left Italy in big numbers and moved to the United States or moved to other countries because Italy's politics became so unstable. And even though the majority of the Italian people wanted Italy to leave NATO, Italy stayed in NATO by default. And I think that's kind of how our elite are handling dissent in America right now. Overwhelmingly, Americans don't want the wars. They don't want their civil liberties to go away. They voted for Donald Trump on a platform that Donald Trump was going to protect their civil liberties. And Donald Trump is, to some degree or other, moving like he might move toward peace with Russia. And the FBI is being cut and broken apart. And we got Kash Patel running it. And so now the idea is to, make politics so messy and confusing, and get all the dissidents at each other's throats and suspicious of one another, et cetera, and create an atmosphere of cynicism so that the popular will against the establishment doesn't get enacted, and the establishment just kind of wins by default. And that is very much how they're trying to manipulate things. They don't want there to be a very clear, coherent opposition message. Instead, they want the opposition to just kind of be cynical, divided, and confused. And I fit the Luigi Mangione celebration in with that, and I think that you can put that in the same category as this kind of desperation for nothing good, for people to declare game over with U.S. foreign policy changing under Trump when things seem to be moving in a very, very good direction. But then Trump makes one comment. They're like, see, nope. It's like when you're desperate to see something, you'll see it, right? If you're a hammer, the whole world will look like a nail. And, if you're expecting bad from the world, you'll get bad, right? I mean, that's kind of how these things work, right? We should be expecting the best while trying to push for it. I'm optimistic and I'm liking a lot of what I'm seeing, but I'm also telling you it ain't over till it's over. It's not done yet, right? So let's wait. Let's get it signed, right? And Trump, I mean, to be fair, Trump did say he would end the war in 24 hours. It's been quite a long time, since 24 hours after he took office. So, I'm still waiting to see it, but I like what I'm seeing. Let's move ahead. But let's not declare game over either. Let's just see.
Speaking, you made a really good point about Italy and the years of lead. This just came out. I want to see if you have a take on this. I'm not sure if you've been paying attention to the Romanian debacle where Colin Gogescu was effectively, the court shut down the election. He has apparently been arrested in Romania. This is the video that's popping up on Twitter just now about his arrest.
Nu, asta mai ține pe intru eu, mă. Vreau să mă las pe
Now, I don't know where these people are saying. They're speaking in Romanian. This is one of the things that J.D. Vance highlighted during his speech, where he pointed out, dude, you are destroying elections. How is this liberal? This is not your liberal values. You're fundamentally missing the boat on this issue. And now the guy's detained. He will win if an election was held and it was an honest election. They seem to be against him winning that election because one of the things that he pointed out, no U.S. military base is going to be in Romania. No, we're not going to join this war effort, etc. Give me a take on this. It's amazing to me that Europe has devolved into this.
Sure. Well, again, it's a lot like the Ukraine narrative. We're told Ukraine was a sovereign country and that Russia is attacking a sovereign country. No, Ukraine lost its sovereignty when the USA toppled their government in 2014. And Romania is another one of these countries we're told is a sovereign country. Well, how sovereign are they if they elect somebody and the results are nullified by the forces that support NATO and the forces that are opposed to Russia and aligned with the United States? During the Cold War, during the 1980s, you had Ceausescu, who was the leader of Romania. And he was a communist leader who was kind of courted by the United States against the Soviet Union. And he got loans from American banks and such, and he pivoted in the 80s in an anti-Soviet direction. And the result was Romania getting into all kinds of debt. And in the 80s, the economy of Romania was very, very bad because American banks basically tricked Romania into pivoting away from the Soviet Union and getting into all kinds of debt. And then Romania was subjected to a color revolution in which the government was toppled, right? It was very similar to what they did all throughout Eastern Europe in 1989. And the government of Ceausescu was violently overthrown. Their leader was killed in a sham trial. I mean, it was not due process. There was, a public execution of their communist leader. And then they were subjected to decade after decade of economic shock therapy in which their economy was absolutely destroyed. Sex trafficking was a really, really big problem in Romania. Whatever you can say, I mean, of course, the socialist and communist government that existed there had a lot of problems with human rights and lack of consumer goods, and especially in the 80s when the debt hit them, they suffered quite a bit. But the women all had like regular jobs. They guaranteed regular jobs. They weren't being sex trafficked, and sex trafficking was huge in Romania in the 90s and the 2000s. It's still a very, very big problem, and unemployment and hunger and they've been really struggling. In Romania, even though things were quite bad in the 80s before the fall, unlike many of the other socialist countries, they were hit pretty bad prior to it because of the debt from American banks. Polls indicate in Romania, just like all throughout Eastern Europe, life was better before the fall of the Soviet Union, before the fall of the Eastern Bloc. Poll after poll after poll shows that. And that's one thing that, in the United States, I constantly will have people condescendingly say to me, Caleb, haven't you ever talked to anyone who actually lived under communism? Well, actually, they do talk to people who lived under communism. And in the Soviet Union and former Soviet Union and Russia, Soviet nostalgia is at an all-time high. 75% of Russians say that the Soviet Union life was better under the Soviet Union, etc. And in every former socialist country, the Eastern Bloc, poll after poll shows people say life was better before the fall. And we're never allowed to hear that in the United States. That's just not acknowledged to be part of the discourse. We meet a guy from we meet a right-wing Ukrainian who's living in our neighborhood, and he tells us about how evil communism is, or we meet a Miami Cuban, and they tell us how evil it is, and that's supposed to be representative of the entire experience of all the people there. Well, that's not representative of all the people there and how they perceive things, right? There are different experiences. I tell people that wars tend to have two sides of them, and I mean, there's this movie that many people have seen called Gone with the Wind. It's a movie that gives the perspective of the Civil War from the side of the Confederacy. And, if you interviewed Miss Scarlett, right, I do declare them Yankees came down here and ruined everything. Oh my God, Abraham Lincoln's a tyrant. She wouldn't be lying. That would be her perspective. She saw things that way. That's one side of the story, but there's obviously another side of the story for the enslaved people, for the people living in the North, for the working class people who were competing with slave labor and were paid very poverty wages in the South. I mean, there's other sides to the story, and that when we talk to people, from various Eastern European countries or from various communist or anti-imperialist countries, you have to remember you're hitting one side of the story that is their perspective. I remember one time years ago, I used to sell communist newspapers on New York City subways. Me and my friend, we were going through the subways selling communist newspapers. There was a woman from Romania, and she saw us selling the communist newspaper. And I remember she said to us, she said, I grew up in Romania. It was horrible. It was horrible. And I said, well, isn't it a lot worse now? And she paused and she said, actually, yeah, it's way worse now. But she'd never thought of that, right? And she'd come here from Romania, and all the Americans want to hear all about the horrors of communism. And no one ever validates you if you say things are worse off now. But there's no way to argue that Romania has been better off since the fall of the Soviet Union.
You were selling communist newspapers on the New York subway.
Yeah.
That is astonishing. What was the engagement with that? I'm super curious on how did they. The reason why I'm asking this is.
Well, I used to do that every day. I mean, when I first came to New York City around the time of Occupy Wall Street, I mean, I would do that to pay my bills practically. And so I would just go up and down the subways selling communist newspapers. I would stand by the subway stop in Union Square and I'd say, communist newspaper, get the latest issue. And I'd stand there. And some days after an hour, I'd walk home with 75 $1 bills in my pocket. I could just, it was, the main thing was you have a lot of traffic, a lot of people going by, and it's an oddity, right? You don't see a communist newspaper every day.
Yeah.
And then you're willing to, if people argue with you, you can give people kind of a perspective they'd never heard. It was certainly an interesting way to meet people, certainly getting out of your shell. When I was 15 years old, I was a teenager, and I went to a communist bookstore. My mom dropped me off, and she said, don't leave the store. Whatever you do, don't leave the bookstore. And I remember that I listened to the speeches about the Iraq War or whatever, and then they handed me a stack of newspapers, and they're like, we're going to go out and we're going to sell the paper. And I remember I was just like, oh my goodness, you what? Like, no. You want me to, get people to, I don't know, walk up to people I don't know and ask them to pay me actual money for a newspaper about communism? You got to be kidding me. This is the most scary thing. I went out and I could barely get the words out. I could barely get the words out. And the first communist newspaper I ever sold, I was wearing my high school Letterman's jacket. I was an athlete. I played soccer, and I had a big O because I grew up in Orrville, Ohio. Right. And there was a big O on my Letterman's jacket. And there was a couple, and the guy said to me, he said, well, I don't agree with you, but you went to you're from Oberlin College. So you got a big O on there. So I'll buy your newspaper. That was the first newspaper I ever sold. And I didn't go to Oberlin College. I just saw the O on my jacket, and he bought it. But I got to be pretty good at it. It was something I did for many years. It was just, you go out to people and give them the perspective. And that was, there's a whole tradition of that. I mean, nowadays people are very online, and, but for a long time, that was a thing that used to happen. People used to joke. You went into certain neighborhoods, there'll be communists on the street corner trying to sell you their newspaper, and that was something I did for many years. And it got me out of my shell. I learned to not be as shy. I learned to talk to people. I learned to hold my own in an argument. I learned to engage with people. It was certainly an educational thing. And it was very much an opportunity to learn from people. And, you hear all kinds of things when you're just out there talking to people, especially in New York City. We have people from all over the world. That was something I did for many years, and I gained a lot of insights from it. Yeah.
Oh, that is super fascinating. The opposition, we don't have a communist party in the U.S. anymore, unfortunately, or at the very least not a major one that was a force, let's say back during the FDR era.
Yeah.
And so we are stuck with the opposition of Hakeem Jeffries and his Democratic Party. Jeffries is bitching here that Democrats and lefties are bitching at him, because I'm just going to play the clip, and I'm going to get your take after the clip.
Well, listen, the extreme left protest me more than they protest Donald Trump. Literally, wherever I go. So I think in part because I've declined, I've refused, I've chosen not to bend the knee to either people on the far left, and certainly not to Donald Trump. And
God, he is such a weird guy. I hate saying that because I don't like to pick on physical stuff. But God, he's such a weird guy to do this job. He comes across robotic. He seems like he has like Asperger's or something like that. I don't even know what he means by the far left. What does he mean? What does the Democratic Party mean when they say the far left? I have no idea what he means by this.
I assume he's referring to Palestine protesters. I think that's what he's referring to. More recently,
And
you know, there has
he defines the far left as being pro or being against genocide. That has to be a different standard. Like, that can't be the only standard that he's using. Make his argument about the far left.
Yeah, but that's probably, I would assume that's what he's referring to. I will say that Hakeem Jeffries, I find him to be despicable, because when he was first, you know, running for the U.S. House of Representatives, he was running against Charles Barron. And I don't know if you know Charles Barron. He was a member of the New York City Council. He's been a member of the New York State General Assembly. And I actually just got to hang out with Charles Barron in Florida at the Uhuru trial. He called himself an elected revolutionary, is what he called himself. He's a black nationalist and a socialist. And he was in the New York City Council for many years, representing East New York. And he ended up getting the endorsement of a number of key figures, and he ran against Hakeem Jeffries in the Democratic primary, for the House of Representatives. And I was out on the street campaigning for Charles Barron. And the whole political establishment came together and said, we just can't let Charles Barron win. And Hakeem Jeffries was basically handed the seat, because I believe there was a robocall from Barack Obama telling people they had to vote for Hakeem Jeffries. And there was, they went crazy. There were signs, that were in the subways, and I had a picture of like Stalin, Mao, Gaddafi, and Mugabe, and it said all people who Charles Barron supports. And they went over the top against Charles Barron, and Hakeem Jeffries ended up winning the seat. And I was out there campaigning, and Charles Barron has a base of support in East New York, but the entire Democratic Party machine came together. And then the icing on the cake was, I don't know how they swung this, but it had to have been arranged. A couple days before the election, David Duke, the white supremacist, endorsed Charles Barron. And you serious? Yeah, because he's anti-Israel, right? Because and the New York Post put that on the front page. David Duke endorses black candidate Charles Barron. And that was it was like I had never seen like a full, it was like they were determined to keep Charles Barron out of office. And it was like the establishment was just adamant that Charles Barron could not be a member of the U.S. Congress. And so Hakeem Jeffries was just the other guy, right? That this revolutionary, this anti-imperialist, this guy who went to Gaza to stand with the Palestinians, this friend of Hugo Chavez, he was going to win. And so that couldn't be allowed to happen. So Hakeem Jeffries was just the establishment guy who ended up getting it. And that's all he's really ever been. I just see him as a walking incarnation of the political establishment in New York City. That's all he's ever been. And so I look up to Charles Barron. So whenever I hear Hakeem Jeffries talking, it's just like, yeah, whatever, whatever he needs to say, whatever the establishment line is. And he's very, very pro-Israel. If I'm not mistaken, I believe at one rally he got up and said, Israel today, Israel tomorrow, Israel forever, which was almost a reference. I mean, it was like an odd, dog whistle of segregation today, segregation tomorrow, segregation forever. Right. And many people noticed that, and they said that was a very odd thing for him to say. But yeah, when he talks about the far left protesting him, I'm sure it's Palestine, because there is a very big Palestine movement in New York City where he's representing, and there's many people in New York City that are like, maybe we shouldn't give Israel a free pass to commit genocide against the Palestinians. And I'm sure he doesn't appreciate those protests against him. So he feels like he's a victim somehow of people getting up and saying, hey, maybe we shouldn't bomb and kill the Palestinians. So there you go. And in New York City in particular, the pro-Israel folks have a lot of power, and there's a lot of, if you oppose Israel, there's a lot of people that are lined up against you. He's lined up with those folks, with the pro-Israel lobby in New York City, but there's a lot of people among the rank and file who don't agree with them. I remember, I was arrested at an Occupy Wall Street demonstration. And I was in the jail cell, in the holding cell with other people. And we were talking about politics. And somebody asked me, they said, do you hate the Israelis? And I said, well, I support the Palestinians or whatever. I don't hate the Israelis or whatever. Yeah. But then I found out they weren't talking about the Israelis in Israel. they were talking about Israeli landlords in Brooklyn, and
Oh,
apparently a load of the landlords are not Jews, but literally Israelis. Israeli companies control Brooklyn, right? And that they have property in the West Bank, and they've got property in Israel, and
New
they
York.
are gentrifying Crown Heights, and that Israeli corporations are something that many working class people in New York City feel has a lot of power and is pushing them out of their neighborhoods, etc. So it was quite an interesting conversation. But when you talk about gentrification in New York City, you're not just fighting against big corporations. You're literally fighting against Israel, because a lot of the corporations that are doing the gentrification and driving up the rents are literally based in Tel Aviv or Jerusalem. I mean, it's pretty wild to see how all these things are connected.
Just wow. I want to add to that from that Hakeem Jeffries clip. This from James Carville. James Carville, it's time for a daring political maneuver. Democrats, there's nothing Democrats can legitimately do to stop Trump, so we need a tactical pause in our fight to plan for the future. Again, I don't like, I think what people want is them to represent something and to be something. Like, meaning they want something with a value set, with a core. They want to be able to say, okay, what does the Democratic Party stand for, and being able to explain what that means and the actions that come out of whatever that context is, as opposed to we're just completely reflexive against whatever Donald Trump does. And because Donald Trump seems popular right now, and he is the political gravity, we can't really do anything about that. And because we can't do anything about that, we need to pause and we need to think about the future. That is so frustrating for me to hear. Like, that is super frustrating. Why do you think they're missing the boat? Like, why do you, like, what I articulate is, a Project 2025 from the left. Why don't they hit that? Why can't they see that? Like, why are they in their bubble in this way? And I say liberals are in a bubble, either in Europe and the United States. They're in a bubble. Why do you think they're missing the boat?
Well, I think, if anything, this is kind of the brilliance of Donald Trump. He's got the Democratic Party in the ideal weak position to be whatever he does, they complain about it. And that's
Yep.
all that they are, right? And if he can keep them in this spot, he is just going to walk right all over them, right? And he's got this thing where he says something. Again, he doesn't do something. He says something, and they react to it. How many times does this happen that he says something, and then CNN and all of them go into overdrive about it, and he said something. And if they stay in this space, Donald Trump is going to win. He's going to roll right over them, and he's going to get everything he wants. And I think that James Carville and a lot of Democrats realize that if they remain in that spot that Donald Trump has, that little corner Donald Trump has painted them into, they're just going to keep losing. However, the problem for the Democrats is that if they are actually going to, gain any momentum, they're going to have to actually stand for something. And they made a decision as a party that, the Bernie Sanders agenda, actually fighting for healthcare for all, Medicare for all, actually fighting for, college for all, those things. No, we're just not going to do that. We will not do that. And they might make some noise come election season, but they're not going to do that. And they will actively fight against any faction in their party that actually wants to, raise those proposals in a serious way. The Democrats have kind of painted themselves into a corner, and this is what they're stuck being. And Donald Trump is just going to keep winning as long as they're in that corner. But leaving that corner would require an element of political bravery that I don't see anyone within that establishment having. Bill Clinton, he led something called the Democrat Leadership Council in the 1980s that pushed out anything that was left of the Roosevelt wing of the Democratic Party. And since then, I mean, there's really nobody left in the Democratic Party that has charisma, that has strength, that has kind of a willingness to push back against popular forces. The fact that they nominated Kamala Harris, who is less popular than Biden is, they nominated her last time, even though throughout the party, everybody knew she's just wildly unlikable. Here we are. That was the argument. Talk about weird. I mean, that was her argument, right, against Donald Trump. He's weird. JD Vance is weird, right?
It's so strange.
just go along and believe everything the establishment says. But Trump and Vance are weird. I mean, it's like, what are we in first grade? I mean, this is, but this is where we're at. And
Campaign
that's
about
where
joy.
Democrats had. Vote for us because we're normal. We're the de facto what you're supposed to believe. Well, look outside and look at the Francis Scott Key Bridge falling down, and look at the conditions in the country, and the opioid epidemic, and the next generation stuck in a lifetime of low wage, short term service sector jobs. Yeah, the status quo isn't going to cut it. So somebody who's got something new and someone who's at least speaking against that status quo is probably going to win. And in most people's minds, calling someone weird is not an argument at all, right? If anything, it makes it okay. You got something new and different. You're gonna get us out of this mess. Let's hear it. Now, again, I worry about the fallout. Now, I'm hearing the idea we might get a stimulus check from the Doge money. Have you heard this? Right, that they might give us instead of just saving the money, they might send us a stimulus check with the money.
I believe it when I see it.
Yeah, well, that would be nice, right? Send Americans a check. But honestly,
and by the way, it would be powerful. Like one of the things that people remember about Trump is the stimulus check. That's one of the, when you talk to people, it comes up in conversation. I just don't believe it. Yeah, I just don't believe it.
Yeah, so that would be nice. But honestly, if you just take all these good-paying government jobs out of the economy and you replace them, and the jobs that do exist are the low-wage jobs that our economy is turning out right now, where you can't make enough to rent an apartment or get a mortgage on a house, or Americans are just not making enough. And if you get rid of all the good-paying government jobs and you replace them with private sector jobs that are paying so little, I don't see that being good for the economy in the long term. I just don't see, there's going to be problems ahead. No doubt, right? And that I understand that Elon Musk is trying to break apart the state, which he sees the state as holding back the interests of business owners, et cetera. But the state has a lot to do with stimulating the economy. Look, the capitalist system has a built-in problem of glut. Where, the reason we have food stamps, it's not just because people feel bad for low-income families and want them to have food. It's because big agribusiness needs to sell products. And, in the 90s, there was talk of cutting food stamps, and there were big protests against it, sponsored by Kraft. They were sponsoring it because if you cut food stamps, they're going to lose money, and that the U.S. government does a huge amount to stimulate the economy because of the built-in, irrationality of the capitalist economic system. When people are homeless because there are too many houses, where people are hungry because there's too much food, where you have this problem of glut, where, the U.S. government buys billions of dollars worth of cheese and buries it in a cave in Springfield, Missouri, to keep the agribusiness from collapsing, to keep the price of dairy high enough that the farm sector keeps going. And that if you just get the government out, the result is going to be you're going to have more instability on the market. And so, I worry about the long-term effects. I'm excited about the foreign policy moves. And I can't say I'm not happy to some degree or other to see the FBI and CIA and other institutions, USAID, broken up. But at the same time, there's going to be a big hole in our economy that needs to be fixed. And, I liked what Donald Trump said. When he was out of office, he gave a speech about the quantum leap. And he wants to build new cities, and all of that. And I hope that he means some of that. And that would be great to see him investing in communities. Ultimately, we need a national bank to inject credit into American communities, et cetera. I don't see any of that on the agenda. I see kind of a libertarian agenda, and libertarian economics, whether you call it Austrian school, Chicago school, Montpellier society, whatever you want to call it. It's premised on the notion that you can cut your way into economic growth. You cannot cut your way into growth. You just can't do it. Economic growth does not come from having less, right? If you cut the wages of government employees, if you cut government spending, if you cut the funding for infrastructure, the result is you have less. And that, rich people, the ultra rich, they reinvest their money to make more money. Right. You and I, we spend money when we have it. But the richest of the rich, if they have more money and they don't have to pay taxes on it, it sits in their bank account until the economy gets moving again, and they can make more money by reinvesting it. And if they can't make more money on it, it sits in their bank account and it gradually depreciates over time because of inflation. Yeah, I mean, you cannot cut your way into economic growth. Austerity economics doesn't work. It is austerity economics, Ludwig von Mises and all of that stuff, Milton Friedman, Friedrich von Hayek, Alan Greenspan, all of that. This is wizardry. This is flim flam. And basically what it is it's a mechanism for trying to convince people that it is in society's interest for we, the working people, to carry the burden of the irrational capitalist economy. This economy based on speculation and derivative ripoff schemes and the profits of the rich. This economy is very unstable, and it's about making us pay for the irrationality of the economy by taking cuts on our services, and it doesn't improve the economy. And in the 90s, after the fall of the Soviet Union, they tried to implement this, and it was an economic disaster in Eastern Europe. They tried it in South and Central America, and everywhere they tried to implement austerity economics, they implemented it, and it was a disaster. And here in the United States, we've been doing this for years. School choice, prisons for profit, you name it. We are the most free market oriented society of any Western country. And the result is we don't have a higher life expectancy. We don't have better living conditions. No, austerity economics is flim flam. It doesn't work. You cannot cut your way into economic growth. And we're going to learn that the hard way. What we need is a government that punches up and will break the power of the big monopolies and stand up for working families. We have a government that punches down right now, a government that restricts economic growth, a government that holds back innovation and creativity. So a lot of people want to break that government up. But they're going to learn that we don't just need to break up the austerity government and the degrowth Malthusian government. We need a government that punches up, a government that fights for working families. We need a national bank to inject credit into communities. We need to take our natural resources under public ownership. We need schools, healthcare, and education as a way to invest in our population, because it is human labor power and human creativity and human beings that are the source of real wealth, physical economy. It comes from human beings. It doesn't come from Wall Street, speculation and ripoffs. And we ultimately need to invest in our population. We need to build infrastructure, new highways, new bridges, new universities, new hospitals, new power plants, right? Physical economy. We need a government of action to fight for working families.
Caleb Maupin, I agree with everything that just came out of your mouth. Caleb Maupin, he is speaker, writer, journalist, political analyst, and he is Caleb, are you the leader of the Center for Political Innovation?
Well, Peter Coffin and myself are the co-directors. So we share that role, and we lead the organization, the Center for Political Innovation. We're doing great stuff. We're headed toward Chicago in July. We're going to have a big convention in Chicago, July 12th. That's going to be the event of the summer. There'll be 400 people packed into that auditorium. We're very excited for it. So, keep that
badass, man.
Yeah.
That is so cool.
Yeah.
Caleb Maupin, man, thank you for this. Always appreciate talking to you, Caleb. Always learn something from these conversations. Be safe.
Great.